You've changed. You know you've changed. Your thoughts are sharper. Your emotions more refined. Your intentions crystal clear. You've shifted your patterns, elevated your frequency, and fine-tuned the way you relate to yourself and the world. And yet, everything around you looks eerily the same. People still treat you as though you haven't evolved. Circumstances seem to resist movement. Opportunities seem suspended in some kind of strange stasis. It's as if you're living in a version of reality that hasn't received the memo that you're no longer the same person. But maybe it has. Maybe the issue isn't that the universe is ignoring you. Maybe it's still syncing, buffering, recalibrating. This experience is not just psychological or emotional. It has deep roots in the nature of reality itself. Quantum mechanics offers a compelling lens through which to explore this strange limbo. In particular, the phenomenon we'll be unpacking today is known as observer drift. This isn't just a poetic concept. Observer drift is a dynamic state in which your consciousness, the inner observer, shifts position or identity, but the external quantum field remains in alignment with a prior version of you. It's the metaphysical equivalent of having already moved, but your mail still being sent to your old address. The signal hasn't caught up to the source. Yet, the foundational concept behind this is known as the observer effect, a principle in quantum mechanics that suggests that the act of observation influences the state of what is being observed. In essence, reality doesn't crystallize into form until it is witnessed. But not just any kind of witnessing, it must be coherent, focused, and anchored in identity. Here's where things get more interesting. If the observer, you, has changed internally, but the identity doing the observing hasn't been recalibrated to match that change, the field struggles to reflect the shift. The gaze is no longer consistent. The signal weakens. Reality waits. This is not about being out of alignment in some vague or mystical sense. This is about the mechanics of conscious interaction with the quantum field. The field, the energetic structure underlying reality, responds not just to what you think or want, but to the self that is holding the thought. When the self changes, so must the calibration of your gaze. Otherwise, you experience a strange liminal stasis, a pause in manifestation, a delay in reflection. This is the space in between identities. Can be disorienting, can feel like you're floating between two realities. And it raises a profound question. If the observer changes, does the reality they observe still obey the same rules? That's exactly where we're headed first. Throughout this series, we'll explore how your internal evolution affects your relationship with time, space, and manifestation, and how to correct the drift when your external world hasn't caught up. You'll discover why the field delays, how to reestablish a coherent signal, and how to finally sync your internal shift with external change. So if you've been sensing the subtle pull of transformation, but watching reality lag behind, you're not crazy. You're not blocked. You're in a very specific and powerful phase of energetic reality work. And by the time we're done here, you'll have the language, the logic, and the tools to navigate it with precision. Let's begin by asking a simple but deeply unsettling question. Who's watching the watcher? The observer effect in quantum mechanics is one of the most intriguing and misunderstood ideas in all of science. It tells us that the very act of observation changes the outcome of what's being observed. But what often gets overlooked is the identity of the observer. Who, or more precisely, what is doing the observing? Let's break this down. In quantum experiments, such as the double-slit experiment, particles behave differently when they're being observed. They act like waves when left unmeasured, showing infinite potential, but when observed, they collapse into a single state. This collapse is what brings a potential into form, turning possibility into actuality. That's the power of observation. But this raises a critical implication. The nature of the observer matters. When you, as a conscious entity, observe your life, your circumstances, your intentions, your desires, your consciousness is acting as that observer. You're collapsing potential states of reality into form through your consistent perception, belief, and emotional engagement. However, when your internal identity shifts, even slightly, the observer that once collapsed a specific field no longer exists in the same form. The lens has shifted, but the field doesn't automatically recalibrate to this new lens. It still responds to the version of you that previously engaged it. This is the heart of observer drift. You may have upgraded your belief systems. You may have released trauma. You may have reprogrammed patterns. But the energetic identity, the baseline frequency of the observer, must be consciously anchored for the field to update accordingly. Here's the twist. The field doesn't respond to your thoughts. It responds to the calibrated totality of the self behind the thoughts. Let's say you once believed you were unworthy of abundance. You carried this belief for years. Every time you tried to change your reality, the field reflected that deeper frequency of lack. But recently, through inner work, you've started believing in your worth. You've visualized success, embraced new habits, even begun speaking differently. And yet, your financial life remains the same. This is not evidence that nothing has changed. This is evidence that the observer has changed, but the field is still linked to your prior registration. This gap, this delay, is where confusion and self-doubt can creep in. It's also where many give up. But there's a deeper layer of quantum logic at play here. In quantum theory, the observer is not separate from the system. The system includes the observer. That means that for the collapse of the field to occur in a new way, the observer must be recognized as part of that new system. And for that to happen, the observer, you, must hold a consistent identity. Inconsistent identity produces noise in the signal. It introduces instability in the collapse process. The field, like any responsive system, requires clarity to deliver coherent output. This is why people often feel like they're oscillating between progress and setback, between high frequency and old patterns. The gaze is unstable. The observer is drifting. So the question becomes, how do you stabilize the observer? How do you become the self that the field can recognize and respond to consistently? It begins with understanding that the act of watching your reality is not passive. You are not a neutral witness. You are a participant, and more than that, a directive force. But your influence is only as strong as the integrity of your internal reference point. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every emotion you feel, all of it forms a kind of frequency fingerprint. This fingerprint is what the field reads. When your identity is fractured, part of you believing in the new self, part of you still reacting from the old, the field receives mixed signals. And when it receives mixed signals, it delays collapse. You have to choose who's watching. Not conceptually, not motivationally, energetically. That means aligning your thoughts, emotions, memories, behaviors, and even your posture, language, and tone with the version of you that you are becoming, not the one you're shedding. And you must hold that alignment long enough for the field to recognize the new observer as the stable witness of the system. This is not manifestation in the popular sense. This is quantum congruence. You're not asking for something to show up. You're establishing the observer that reality must respond to. And here's where things become empowering. Once you recalibrate the observer, the field has to collapse differently. It has no choice, because it is bound by the identity of the system, and you are that system's most central node. So if your reality still looks the same, ask yourself this: has the observer truly changed, or are remnants of the old still holding the lens? The path forward is not in asking the field to behave differently. It is in becoming the version of you that observes differently. From there, the field will follow. It always does. Next, we will explore how the field begins to sync to a new observer and why sometimes it just doesn't. At least not right away. Let's look at the phenomenon of quantum lag. When the self has shifted, but the world appears frozen in a feedback loop. Have you ever felt like you've outgrown your current life, but it keeps looping back anyway? You've reshaped your inner world. You've done the energetic groundwork. The version of you that existed a few months ago, maybe even a few weeks ago, no longer holds the wheel, and yet your surroundings stubbornly reflect that past self. It's as though your life has hit the repeat button, cycling through echoes of a timeline you no longer claim. This is not random. It's not resistance. It's a highly specific phase of energetic reconfiguration, what can be called quantum lag. This experience is not psychological delay. It's not a lack of effort or a flaw in focus. It's what happens when the internal observer shifts position within the quantum field. but the collapse process has not yet updated to reflect that transition. The field still holds memory of the previous input. In technical terms, this is a form of systemic inertia, a buffering effect caused by prior observation patterns. In classical physics, a system responds immediately to force. Push an object, it moves. But in quantum mechanics, the delay is more subtle. Observation collapses a probability wave into form, but only when the signal is clean, consistent, and uninterrupted. If the internal shift is recent, and the new observer identity hasn't stabilized long enough, the field registers ambiguity. This is where quantum lag begins. Let's take this further. Quantum decoherence refers to the process by which quantum systems lose their probabilistic nature and begin to behave classically, predictably. In daily terms, it's how potential becomes pattern. Now apply that to identity. When you shift into a new frequency, a new belief, a new emotional baseline, a new decision framework, you are disrupting your prior coherence. But the environment that formed around your previous coherence doesn't vanish immediately. It unwinds in fragments. The timeline you're currently experiencing is not current. It is an echo. It is the result of past coherence still running its program while your new configuration begins to stabilize. This echo effect has significant implications. It means the field is not ignoring you. It's reconciling you. It is recalibrating to the new signal, but only when the new self remains consistent enough to overwrite the old input. If you oscillate, if your emotional frequency drops, if you revisit old doubts, if your internal compass spins, the field doesn't update. It holds the last strong signal. That's quantum loyalty to imprint. The phenomenon of lag can create dissonance. You walk into a familiar space, but it feels alien. You engage with familiar people, but the resonance is off. You pursue goals that once felt magnetic, but now they drain your energy. The past is still showing up physically, but your system no longer meets it energetically. The mismatch creates friction, and that friction is often misinterpreted as failure. But friction is not failure. Friction is feedback. You're interacting with a reality that's out of phase with you, and that's a signal you've actually changed. You are no longer collapsing the same version of the field. But the field, dense, structured, patterned, is still catching up. Think of the quantum field as a mirror. But it's not a surface-level mirror. It's more like a deep algorithmic feedback system. It doesn't just reflect what you think. It reflects what your system believes repeatedly, what it broadcasts emotionally, what it maintains consistently. When that consistency is new, the mirror lags. It checks for stability. If your signal persists, the reflection shifts. That's when the quantum lag ends. But only then. This is why so many people feel like they've changed, but nothing is different. It's because the lag hasn't cleared. They haven't sustained the new signal long enough for the field to reorganize. So they collapse back. They assume their changes didn't work. They revert emotionally, behaviorally, energetically, and in doing so reinforce the old imprint. The field returns to stasis. Nothing moves. Here's the deeper truth. The field doesn't reward occasional intention. It responds to unwavering calibration. If you're seeing repetition, it isn't proof that your shift didn't work. It's proof that you're in a buffering zone. The shift is real, but the mirror hasn't received enough data to reflect it. The observer is new. The field is still updating its source registry. To navigate quantum lag, the key is non-reactivity. Do not respond to the old echo with frustration. Do not interpret the appearance of the past as validation of your failure. Do not negotiate with outdated reality. Hold the signal. Your job is not to control the timeline. Your job is to maintain the new observer identity until the field reorients. That means aligning thoughts, actions, emotions, and behaviors with your current state, not your visible environment, especially not your environment. This phase is a test of consistency. The field is looking for identity integrity. Can you maintain the new self, even when the world does not yet reflect it? Can you trust the mechanics long enough for the mirror to catch up? Because once it does, the changes are sudden. The lag doesn't taper, it clears in waves. What once felt distant collapses into immediacy. Reality reboots. The observer has finally registered, and the system collapses accordingly. In this space, Time is less of a factor than coherence. So if the world around you still seems to reflect the old you, take a breath. That's not failure. That's latency. Stay in signal. Don't update the field. Update the observer. That's where the control is. Always. Next, we will explore how fragmentation in your identity creates static in the quantum field. And why calibrating the internal observer is not just optional, it is the mechanism of reality shift. Could your unacknowledged inner fragmentation be scattering the field's signal? When you engage the field with a fractured identity, even subtly, the signal you send is not cohesive enough to collapse potential into form. This is the phenomenon of identity collapse. It's not a breakdown in belief. It's a diffusion of presence. The field doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to the unified force behind your attention. Let's begin with the observer as a projector. You are not a passive lens witnessing reality. You are an emitter broadcasting frequency, expectation, and intent through every layer of your being. Your consciousness is not located in just your mind or thoughts. It emanates through your nervous system, your emotional baseline, your assumptions, your posture, your breath, and your memory loops. Every part of you is participating in the field interaction. But here's the catch: when different parts of you hold conflicting programs, the signal becomes distorted. One part of you may be envisioning success. Another part still anticipates rejection. One part of you affirms abundance. Another prepares for scarcity. One part is ready for expansion. Another still plays small. These fragments do not cancel each other, they dilute the signal. They scatter the intent. The field receives interference. The result? Nothing collapses. Or worse, something contradictory does. Identity collapse isn't just about confusion. It's about frequency integrity. You cannot create coherence in your external world until there is resonance within. The observer must act as one unified node of consciousness. A single identity, clear, stable, deliberate. This is why people who shift their mindset but not their emotional body often see no change. The thought is new, but the somatic imprint is old. The observer is split. The system can't register a clean input. Calibrating the observer means bringing all layers of the self into agreement. That includes language, memory, habits, emotional reflexes, and unconscious assumptions. It means scanning for hidden scripts, the ones that sabotage intention beneath the surface, and reprogramming them into alignment. Let's break this into 3 planes. Cognitive coherence. Your thoughts and intentions must match your goals. Not just in surface-level affirmation, but in assumption. If you still assume failure is likely, the field interprets that as dominant. Emotional coherence. Your dominant emotions shape your signature. The field reads your emotional tone more strongly than your words. If your heart is still anchored in fear or resignation, your frequency reflects that more than your vision board. Behavioral coherence. The field listens to action. How you move, speak, respond, these carry more signal than theory. When your behaviors are out of sync with your claimed identity, the system gets conflicting feedback. To calibrate the observer, you must unify these planes. This doesn't mean perfection. It means direction. When all aspects of your identity begin facing the same vector, the field receives a coherent transmission. That's when collapse occurs. Here's a key insight. Identity is not static. It is emergent. You're not bound to a personality structure. You are the sum of choices you repeatedly make. You can reassign your identity by changing the signal. But it must be complete, not just conceptual. Most people update their minds but not their habits. Or their beliefs but not their environments. Or their vocabulary but not their body. These partial shifts don't produce results. The field doesn't collapse on fragments. Collapses on totality. That's why your observer identity is sacred. It is the epicenter of your influence. If you are not calibrated, the field waits. It doesn't punish. It simply holds potential. When you resolve your fragments, when you unify your lens, reality forms around it like magnetized particles arranging themselves around a core. Your job is not to force reality. It is to purify the observer. Strip away contradiction. Harmonize the parts. Establish the self that can carry a stable signal, even in silence. That's the real power. Next, we will explore the role of focused observation, how the gaze itself becomes a sculptor of probability, and what happens when your attention lacks integrity. Your attention isn't just passive. It's a quantum sculptor of time-space. The field doesn't respond to random observation. It responds to focused awareness. Not glancing, not passive noticing, but the kind of gaze that locks into a reality so completely that the wave function has no choice but to collapse around it. That is the nature of directed consciousness. And it's not metaphorical. It's the machinery behind creation. In the quantum world, particles behave like waves, pure potential until observed. Once observed, they collapse into definite form. But here's the critical misunderstanding. It's not just the act of looking that causes collapse. It's the nature of the observer's attention. What kind of gaze is being cast? Is it diffused? Is it fragmented by disbelief? Or is it concentrated, rooted in expectation, and unwavering? Your gaze isn't neutral. It is an instruction set. Where you focus your attention is where energy begins to organize. And how you focus determines how sharply the field can define that organization. If your attention is flickering, uncertain, easily distracted, the field receives noise. But when your attention becomes deliberate, not through effort, but through clarity, the field aligns. This explains why people who appear less intelligent or talented can still generate more precise outcomes. It's because they often believe in their intent without contradiction. Their attention is unburdened by complexity. It's clean. And clean attention is more powerful than sophisticated doubt. Let's examine the mechanics of gaze. Attention is like a laser, but that laser has an emotional frequency. It carries the weight of belief, expectation, emotional tone, and subconscious instruction. When you focus on a goal, the signal behind the gaze is what instructs the field. If your gaze is laced with fear, the collapse of reality reflects that fear. If your gaze is driven by need, the collapse reflects need. If your gaze is suffused with certainty, with the kind of internal knowing that doesn't plead or negotiate, the collapse responds accordingly. This is why intensity of focus without emotional congruence doesn't yield results. You can visualize for hours, but if your gaze is fragmented emotionally, if it carries an undertone of desperation or doubt, you are miscalibrating the field. Now consider what happens when you stop directing your gaze altogether. The field doesn't go blank. It defaults to autopilot. Whatever unconscious patterns you've built, whatever beliefs have taken root without your awareness, begin to project by default. This is why people who lack clarity live lives full of reactive patterns. They're not observing with intention. They're being observed by old programming. The shift occurs when you reverse that process, when you become the one who sees with authority. Not frantic desire, not anxious projection, but with calibrated certainty. That certainty doesn't come from evidence. Precedes evidence. This is where most people fail to sustain change. They wait for results to justify their focus. But quantum systems don't work that way. The field doesn't follow feedback. It follows command. And command is established by consistent gaze. Let's bring this home with a core insight. Reality collapses around the structure of your attention. When your attention is unfocused, the structure dissolves. When your attention is split, the field collapses into contradictions. But when your attention is organized, unified, and sustained, reality bends. This is why ancient spiritual disciplines emphasize concentration. Meditation, prayer, mantra, breath control, all of them are techniques for training the gaze. Not the eyes, but the inner observer. When that observer becomes still, focused, and steady, the quantum field becomes equally steady in response. In modern life, attention is weaponized by distraction. Algorithms, media, mental clutter, all designed to fragment the gaze. Not to weaken your mind, but to prevent you from seeing long enough to collapse anything meaningful. Fragmented attention is powerless. Coherent attention is alchemical. So how do you sharpen your gaze? Set specific targets. The field doesn't respond to vague goals. Know what you are looking at. Define the outcome in precise emotional and energetic terms. Sustain the frequency. Do not look once and then retreat into doubt. Stay with the outcome, not as a task, as a presence. Remove contradictions if part of your attention is focused, but the rest is worried about how you're sending opposing signals. Establish rituals of focus, daily stillness, breath work, focus journaling, visual concentration. These aren't self-help tricks. They are neurological recalibrations. Starve the distractions. Every time you split your attention for trivial noise, you teach the field you're not serious. Cut the signal pollution. Your gaze is not casual. It is sacred. And every day you practice using it with clarity, the more quickly your external reality adjusts to reflect that power. Next, we will explore the state of observer drift, when the internal shift has occurred, but the field is still echoing the old signal, and how to correct the mismatch. Have you already shifted timelines, but your environment missed the memo? There is a moment in the transformation process that feels strangely hollow. You've upgraded your thoughts. Your habits reflect your growth. Your decisions align with your higher self. And yet, your outer world seems frozen. The people around you behave as though nothing changed. The opportunities are stale. The feedback from life feels stuck. This isn't spiritual punishment. It's not some karmic test. It's a highly specific energetic phenomenon. Observer drift. Observer drift is the state in which the observer identity has shifted internally, but the external quantum field hasn't yet updated its link to that observer. You are seeing reality from a new frequency, but reality is still running on the previous reference point. The system is out of sync. This creates tension, creates emotional ambiguity. Part of you feels liberated. Another part feels trapped. The contrast is painful, not because it's invalid, but because it confirms you've genuinely changed. But change is not enough. The field doesn't shift because you evolved. It shifts when the observer link is updated and stabilized. Until then, your environment behaves as if you're still the old self. This is why so many people collapse back into the familiar. They conclude their growth isn't real because reality doesn't reflect it. But that's misreading the mechanism. Let's break this down. Every observer, meaning every version of your identity, has a unique energetic signature. When you hold that signature long enough, the field collapses into agreement. It begins to deliver feedback, events, people, and experiences that correspond to the new version of you. But here's the key that only happens when the field believes the observer shift is stable. The field must verify identity before it reorients itself. And in the meantime, it continues reflecting the last stable identity you broadcasted. That lag is not malfunction. It is a feature. The field resists erratic observers. It waits for coherence. It waits for confirmation. During this period, you are essentially overlapping timelines. Internally, you're tuned to one station. Externally, you're still hearing the echoes of another. The quantum radio is fading out one signal and tuning into another, but the static is still present. This is observer drift. And while it feels disorienting, it is also a signal of progress. It means you've moved, and the only step left is to stabilize the new observer. But how? First, recognize the drift for what it is. Do not interpret the delay as a denial. Do not chase new feedback to prove the shift. And most importantly, do not begin responding to the old field. That's the trap. You are being watched by the field. The moment you engage the old field with old reactions, defensiveness, fear, anger, withdrawal, the field assumes you've reverted. The shift dissolves. The collapse reverts. Your power is in consistency. This is not about being unaffected. It's about becoming unmoved by outdated patterns. Let the environment echo what it must. You are no longer sourcing your identity from it. You are teaching it who you are now through repetition, emotional neutrality, and behavioral authority. In observer drift, every choice you make is part of the synchronization process. You are instructing the field with your silence. You are collapsing the timeline not by seeking signs, but by embodying inevitability. Eventually, the old timeline dissolves. The new one locks in. The field acknowledges your identity as the new source. And when that happens, the update is sudden. Realities that seemed immovable shift. People respond differently. Momentum resumes. The field finally reflects who you've become, not who you were. Until that happens, your job is simple. Do not react to the lag. Do not rehearse the old identity. Do not negotiate with your environment for permission. You've shifted, and the field is catching up. Next, we will examine how to stabilize that shift, so the observer becomes a conductor of coherent collapse, and your upgraded identity becomes magnetic to aligned outcomes. You're flickering between realities like an unstable waveform. Change doesn't occur the moment you think differently. Change occurs the moment your internal frequency becomes stable enough for the field to collapse around it. That's the real work, not initiating a shift, but stabilizing it. Because if your energy flickers, if you oscillate between the new self and the old habits, the quantum field won't respond. It will wait. This is where most people lose momentum. They've done the inner work. They've cleared limiting beliefs. They've envisioned a new future. But their internal signal keeps stuttering. One day they are grounded. The next, reactive. 1 hour they are certain. The next, filled with doubt. The field reads this as fragmentation, and fragmentation cannot generate collapse. Stabilization isn't about intensity. It's about continuity. In quantum mechanics, stability means coherence. It means the signal holds shape over time. The waveform doesn't collapse based on peaks of effort or bursts of emotion. It collapses based on the sustained integrity of the observer's frequency. You are either in phase with the outcome or you are not. You cannot flicker your way into a new timeline. This is why your nervous system is so important. Your nervous system is the conductor of your reality signal. If it's dysregulated, if you are anxious, reactive, emotionally volatile, your observer state is unstable. The field receives chaos. It doesn't know what to collapse. It stalls. So the first move in stabilizing the shift is regulating your body. No amount of intention or vision will override a body that is still anchored in survival. You must bring safety into your system. You must anchor your baseline in calm authority. From there, coherence begins. Here are some foundational tools for stabilizing your observer identity. Daily rhythm. Structure reduces chaos. The more stable your behaviors, the more stable your identity feels. This allows the field to begin recognizing your new self as a permanent source. Stillness practices, meditation, breathwork, and conscious silence are not just relaxing, they are coherence training. They teach your observer how to hold a singular frequency. Emotional neutrality. Stability doesn't mean suppression. It means choosing not to emotionally respond to every external fluctuation. You become the unshakable core. The less you react, the more powerful your field becomes. Repetitive signaling, visualization, affirmation, focused journaling. Not as wishful thinking, but as instruction. The field learns through repetition. When you repeat the frequency, it begins to respond. Environmental cleansing. You can't stabilize a new identity in a field polluted by reminders of the old. Remove artifacts, habits, and inputs that keep you tethered to prior versions of yourself. Your task isn't to stay positive. Your task is to remain coherent. That means being who you say you are emotionally, physically, energetically, even when the old field throws distractions at you. Because it will. When you stabilize a new identity, the prior field often throws what feels like a test. Not to punish, but to verify. Can you remain the new self when the old timeline provokes you? Can you stay centered when no external evidence supports the shift? This is the threshold. If you pass it, meaning you hold your frequency, the field collapses rapidly. Reality moves with clarity. The path becomes smoother. The air feels lighter. Feedback begins to align. But if you break, if you spiral back into reaction, panic, or doubt, the field halts again. Not because you're wrong, but because your signal hasn't locked. This is why grounding is more important than speed. You are not trying to outrun your old self. You are building a new internal climate that can withstand interference without destabilizing. Once stabilized, you become a conductor. Reality flows around you effortlessly. Resistance drops. You begin pulling timelines toward you rather than chasing them. This isn't magical thinking. It's electrical. Your energy becomes predictable. And predictability generates feedback. Just as a clear radio frequency receives a sharp signal, your stable observer state receives sharper collapse events, manifestations, synchronicities, and resonance. but you must hold. You must become the eye of the storm, not the wind. Next, we will look at why the echoes of your old self can still linger, even after a complete internal shift, and how parallel realities keep tugging at your awareness. Are you living in the ghost echo of a past version of you? Quantum theory proposes something staggering, that every potential version of you already exists. These aren't just imaginary constructs. They are real, tangible timelines, each branching from your choices, your emotions, and your beliefs. So when you shift your internal state, you aren't inventing a new self. You are tuning into one of these already existing versions. You're locking into a specific frequency band of identity. But here's what most don't understand. The old versions don't vanish. They echo. And those echoes can disrupt your signal if you don't understand what they are. Let's say you've upgraded. You've shed victimhood. You've released shame. You've embraced a self that chooses, leads, and believes. But you keep feeling random fear, unwanted guilt, or sudden sadness. Not because you've regressed, but because your field is still entangled with residual versions of yourself. Those versions don't go quietly. They linger. They replay their memories. They whisper doubts. They show up as emotional flashbacks, dream fragments, or unexpected patterns. These are echoes. You are receiving transmissions from timelines you used to inhabit, and sometimes from timelines you nearly entered. These ghost signals are not signs you're broken. They are metaphysical reminders that tuning is a process. When you change frequency, the old waves fade. But they don't shut off immediately. They lose volume gradually as your new identity grows louder. Until then, your task is to not mistake the echo for the present. Here's what this means practically. Just because you feel fear doesn't mean you're misaligned. Just because someone treats you like the old you doesn't mean they're right. Just because you recall pain doesn't mean you're regressing. It's all feedback from parallel versions. But here's the risk: if you engage with the echo, if you start feeding it with attention, emotion, or action, you reactivate the old timeline. You retune to the prior self. The collapse gets delayed. The field begins responding to that version again. This is why presence is so important. When the echo comes, notice it, breathe, witness it as a fading signal. But do not dialogue with it. Do not obey it. Do not anchor it. You are receiving data, not instructions. You are not that self anymore. In fact, the more echoes you feel, the more proof you have that the shift is working. You're no longer merged with the past. You're observing it from a higher state. That's progress. Now let's go deeper. Each identity you've ever inhabited has built a momentum of its own, in thought, in memory, in expectation. These create probability fields. When you shift, you are essentially jumping probability curves. But your body, your emotions, and your relationships may still carry tether points to those prior curves. Cutting those tethers is essential. You do this by updating your story. Stop repeating narratives that belong to the old self. Rewrite your past from the lens of the new identity. Letting people respond to the new you, don't play roles they expect. Be who you are now, even if it confuses them. Reprogramming memory anchors, old music, places, phrases, habits. Consciously update their associations. Don't let them pull you back. Calling back your power. Use language like, "That's no longer me," or "That story is complete." Declare sovereignty over your field. The quantum field doesn't erase old timelines, but it deactivates them when you stop feeding them. The echo fades, the noise dims, the channel clears, and then the new identity becomes your default signal. That's when things really accelerate. You no longer wobble. You don't toggle between selves. You don't explain or justify. You simply are. And that version of you, clean, consistent, and clear, begins to collapse a reality that feels like truth, not performance. You don't chase it. You recognize it. Next, we will explore how the field doesn't respond most to your thoughts, but to your emotional resonance, and why feeling is the key to collapsing probability with precision. Does the field respond more to your feelings than your thoughts? Thoughts are language. Emotions are frequency. And in quantum mechanics, frequency is everything. The field doesn't just respond to what you think. It reacts to the energy behind the thought. That energy is emotion. Emotion is not a byproduct of experience. It's a broadcast. It sends out a vibrational signature that either enhances your observational power or distorts it completely. You could hold the most polished thought in your mind, something affirming, confident, future-focused, but if the emotional current underneath that thought is fear, unworthiness, or regret, the field does not respond to the words. It reflects the feeling. That's why so many people experience dissonance between what they affirm and what they experience. They say the right things. They visualize. They set intentions. But the emotional tone they carry contradicts those efforts. And the quantum field doesn't obey language. It obeys resonance. So what is emotional resonance? It is the frequency match between your internal emotional landscape and the version of reality you wish to experience. Each timeline, each outcome has a vibrational range. If you want to experience abundance, but carry the emotional signature of scarcity, your field collapses toward the vibration, not the desire. This is not punishment. It's precision. Emotion calibrates your field faster than thought. Because emotion engages your whole system, your nervous system, your chemical state, your memory matrix. Thought is cognitive. Emotion is embodied. That's why it sends a stronger signal. Now here's where this gets interesting. Most people try to feel better by thinking better. But unless the emotion shifts, the thought does nothing to the field. In fact, thinking positive thoughts while carrying negative emotions sends a fractured signal. The field reads that as confusion, and confusion delays collapse. To influence the quantum field with accuracy, you must create emotional coherence. That means training your body to feel now what your mind is focused on becoming. If the future you seeks freedom, love, power, your system must feel those states now to access that version. You don't wait for reality to change so you can feel different. You feel different and reality changes accordingly. So how do you shift your emotional baseline? You must condition your emotional body. Just like you train muscles, you train feelings. Not by pretending, not by forcing, but by anchoring small, repeated moments of elevated emotional state into your body until they become your default signature. Gratitude, for example, is not just spiritual decoration. It's a frequency that aligns you with reception. When you feel gratitude, real gratitude, not performative, you enter a state of receiving. The field collapses around that openness. Same with joy, love, awe, curiosity. These states are energetic accelerants. They dissolve resistance. They amplify coherence. They make your signal clean. But you must feel them genuinely. Not perform them. Not fake them. You must evoke them in real time, even in the face of old reality. Especially in the face of old reality. That's where power begins. This is why emotional alchemy matters. You take the raw data of your feelings, even the painful ones, and instead of suppressing them, you process them into clarity. You don't bypass sadness. You honor it, feel it, and transmute it into deeper understanding. That process creates emotional maturity. And mature emotions are energetically stable. Stable emotion equals stable field. Let's be clear. You are always manifesting. But what you manifest is tied not to what you think you want, but to the emotional frequency you've trained yourself to live in. So the next time you set an intention, don't ask, what do I want to create? Ask, what does that version of reality feel like? And am I willing to feel it now? Feel it first. The field will follow. Next, we explore how visualization becomes a quantum tool. Not just mental rehearsal, but an access point into alternate probability fields. Is your imagination a time travel device? Imagination is not fantasy. It's interface. It's how consciousness reaches into the field of potential and begins to select, sculpt, and draw out specific outcomes. But most people use imagination passively, as daydream, as escapism. That's not visualization. That's drift. Visualization is a lever, a force that tilts the probabilities toward coherence when used deliberately. The brain doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined event and a physically experienced one. When you visualize with full sensory detail, your system responds as if the event is happening. Neurochemistry shifts, heart rate adjusts, hormonal balance adapts. That means your visualization is not just a mental image, it's an energetic rehearsal. When you rehearse a version of reality over and over in your mind, while feeling it emotionally and holding it in focused awareness, you start anchoring that version of yourself into the quantum field. But there's a key. The visualization must be immersive and emotionally charged. If you visualize passively, like watching a movie, the field doesn't respond strongly. But if you engage with your visualization as a living experience, where you are the person inside the vision, and you feel what they feel, you are collapsing probabilities. This is not about seeing what you want. It's about becoming the version of you who already has it, and then witnessing life from that lens. That shift is subtle, but it's everything. When you visualize, don't imagine how it will happen. Don't chase the mechanics. That creates static. Simply step into the scene. Feel the texture of the air, the weight of your body, the tone of your voice, the details of the environment. Let your senses convince your system that it's real. And then hold that frequency. The more you repeat this process, the more your nervous system begins to normalize the new timeline. What was once a fantasy becomes a familiar signal. And when it becomes familiar internally, the external world begins to reflect it. Not because it's magic, because your calibration changed. This is why athletes, performers, and elite creators use visualization before high-stakes outcomes. They aren't hoping for results. They are installing the future into their system before it arrives. And the field obeys installation. Here's how to make visualization a quantum lever. Practice daily, not occasionally. Daily. The repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity builds identity. Engage all senses. Visualization should not be a sketch. It should be an emotional and sensory immersion. Anchor in emotion. Visualization without feeling is like a radio with no sound. Feel the joy, the safety, the power, the ease, as if it's already occurring. Collapse the how. Do not script steps. Let the field handle delivery. Your job is frequency, not logistics. Integrate afterward. Don't just visualize and walk away. Move through your day as if the self you saw is now at the wheel. Behaviorally reflect the shift. Visualization works not because it tricks the brain, but because it trains the field. It installs a new gravitational center in your consciousness, and reality begins to orbit that center. Remember, the field doesn't care what's real, cares what's coherent. Visualize with integrity, and let that imagined future become the felt now. Next, we will explore the subtle signs that the field has registered your new self, and how synchronicities act as signals that your reality is beginning to shift. Are strange coincidences signs that reality is catching up to you? Reality often whispers before it speaks. Long before massive changes show up in your physical world, subtle indicators begin to ripple through your experience. Tiny shifts, odd alignments, patterns that defy logic. These are not mere chance. They are synchronicities, and they signify that the field has begun its update. When synchronicities start appearing, you're not receiving random cosmic breadcrumbs. You're witnessing the field folding in on itself in response to your stabilized signal. These aren't predictions. They are reflections. Here's how it works. As your internal coherence strengthens, as your identity, emotion, and intention align into a steady frequency, the field doesn't instantly collapse into a new life overnight. Instead, it begins to restructure the web of probabilities around you. Events get reordered. Paths intersect that never did before. People who match your current frequency begin to appear. The appearance of synchronicity marks the point where the outer world starts syncing with the inner update. It's easy to dismiss these moments as coincidence. Seeing repeating numbers, hearing someone speak the exact words you were thinking, receiving a message after focusing on a particular person, getting a solution moments after relaxing into trust. These are field responses. They don't happen randomly. They happen when your energetic signal becomes resonant enough to begin interacting with the quantum mesh of external events. Think of the field like a pool of water. When your vibration changes, the field begins to ripple, and synchronicities are the first waves reaching the edge of your physical reality. They precede full manifestations because the universe works through chain reactions. It has to shuffle matter, timelines, and people to collapse new outcomes. So how should you respond to synchronicity? First, don't overanalyze it. Recognize it. Thank it. and stay steady. These moments are not signs to force. They are confirmations to relax. They say, "You're being heard. Stay tuned." Reacting too eagerly, or trying to recreate them, can disrupt the flow. But acknowledging them with quiet certainty builds a stronger channel. Also understand, synchronicities aren't always pleasant. Sometimes the field collapses an uncomfortable truth to remove misaligned structures. A job ending, a friend leaving, a hidden truth surfacing. All of these can be field responses to your new observer state. They are not setbacks. They are clearings. The field rearranges in favor of your new identity. So, when synchronicities show up, ask yourself, what signal have I been emitting? What shift does this reflect? Am I willing to continue, even if the process is messy? Because collapse isn't always convenient, but it's always aligned. Here are practical ways to engage synchronicity. Keep a synchronicity journal, track patterns. You'll see feedback loops emerge that validate your shift. Use them as calibration points. If you experience a synchronicity, note how you were feeling or thinking just before. That's the signal the field responded to. Release the need for more. The more you chase signs, the more you signal doubt. Trust that synchronicity is an echo of coherence, not a reward. Don't ignore the uncomfortable ones. If something ends or collapses, see it as a field response to your internal upgrade. Resistance delays alignment. Remember, the field will always begin to move once your signal stabilizes, and synchronicity is its first language. Listen carefully. Respond faithfully. Keep tuning. Next, we will explore why the external world doesn't lead, it follows, and why reality is simply your reflection, not your commander. Are you waiting for the world to change, not realizing it's waiting on you? It's a common pattern. You make a shift, a bold choice, a new mindset, a powerful decision, and then pause, waiting for the world to confirm your change. But that pause is a trap, because the field does not initiate. It mirrors. It doesn't lead. It follows. If your identity depends on what you see, you've reversed the mechanism of creation. The universe is not a leader. It's a mirror, a highly intelligent, precisely tuned, real-time reflection of the frequency you consistently emit. When you withhold your new self until you see proof, you're holding the mirror responsible for changing your face. It doesn't work that way. The mirror principle is this: reality only reflects. It has no creative authority apart from your signal. It responds to what you are, not what you say. It delivers what you're calibrated to, not what you fantasize about. This is not about blame. It's about agency. Let's put this into quantum terms. The field is a field of probability, infinite possible outcomes, none of which exist as fact until you observe them. But the observer doesn't just choose what to observe. It becomes the reference point around which reality collapses. You are that reference point. If you wake up hoping for reality to show you you've changed, you've inverted the equation. You've made the effect the cause, the outcome the authority, and that creates a loop of delay, frustration, and confusion. You don't see it because it's true. You see it because it's you. Your frequency is the command line. That means, don't wait to behave like the new self until life validates you. Don't wait to speak like the empowered version of you until people approve. Don't wait to feel joy until circumstances justify it. Do it first, because reality only reflects the frequency you consistently uphold. Here are the distortions to watch out for. I'll believe it when I see it. No, you'll see it when you stabilize belief. I'm waiting for the right time. Time is a trailing indicator. The right time happens after the signal. I need external validation. That's code for, I haven't committed fully to the new self. The mirror doesn't lie. It doesn't judge. It simply shows. If you don't like what you see, don't smash the mirror. Change the input. Adjust the signal. The reflection will update when the source is coherent. Let's ground this in daily practice. Start your day by embodying the new self. Before you check your phone, before you read the news, tune into the identity you're stabilizing. Speak, move, breathe from that space. Ignore the delay. Reality has lag. It's a buffering system. Trust that the mirror is adjusting, but only if your input stays stable. Don't source your mood from circumstances. That's like letting the mirror tell you who you are. Choose your frequency regardless. That's true power. Bless your reflection even if it's not what you want yet. See it as old code clearing. Don't react to it. Observe it. Keep broadcasting the new signal. Eventually, the field has no choice but to reflect the self you've become. It doesn't have the authority to do anything else. It's a quantum mirror. It bends to the observer, and the observer is you. Next, we will move into the final phase, how to reintegrate your new identity not just as an idea, but as a living operating system that holds everything you've built into a stable and expansive now. What if the final step in transformation isn't shifting, but claiming the shift? You've recalibrated your thoughts. You've refined your emotional signature. You've released the echoes of the past, visualized your future, tracked the synchronicities, and understood the mirror. But transformation doesn't solidify until one final act: reclaiming your new self fully, and living from it as if it has always been you. The observer effect isn't just about momentary influence. It's about consistency, a stabilized identity that the field can trust. The quantum field needs a reliable source, one that doesn't fluctuate, second-guess, or slip into old timelines. This is what reintegration means. Reintegration is not a step backward. It's a forward lock. It's where the new you is no longer a vision you visit. It becomes the foundation you operate from. This phase can be deceiving, because the shift has already occurred internally. It's tempting to believe the work is done. But many lose the thread here. They revert to sporadic embodiment. They turn the new identity into a performance instead of an essence. They wear it only in safe spaces. They toggle when pressure hits. This creates leakage, and the field reads it. To reintegrate is to seal the shift, to allow the new self to overwrite the old one, not just intellectually but energetically, behaviorally, and structurally. This is not about becoming something else. This is about no longer negotiating with prior versions of you. Here's the key. Reintegration demands ownership, not curiosity, not analysis, not rehearsal. Ownership. You stop waiting to be convinced. You stop hoping for confirmation. You decide not once but repeatedly that this is who you are now. And you begin editing every area of life that doesn't match that truth. That means you change how you speak. No more qualifiers, apologies, or minimizing your new clarity. You update your behaviors even when no one's watching. Especially then. You revisit your spaces, home, digital, relational, and align them to the new frequency. You uphold your new standards not as a test but as a baseline. You no longer ask if you're ready. You declare that you are. Reintegration is powerful because it triggers the final update in the field. The observer has stabilized. The feedback loop completes. The quantum system recognizes that the signal isn't temporary. It's who you are now. And that's when long-term collapse occurs. Manifestations become sustainable. Relationships recalibrate. Opportunities arrive not with force, but with flow. The gap between internal change and external reflection closes. This is not luck. This is the reward of endurance. But there's a final temptation here, a subtle trap. It's the pull to test. You'll think, has it really worked yet? Should I check? That urge to test creates instability. It's the energetic equivalent of peeking into the oven every 5 seconds and wondering why the cake won't rise. Reintegration demands finality. You don't test the new self. You live it. You don't analyze its effects. You trust its gravity. You walk through the world with the certainty of someone who remembers rather than someone who's hoping. And that's where something remarkable happens. Reality stops resisting you, because it no longer doubts you. You've stopped being a visitor in this identity. You've become the resident. And the field, which once looped you through delay, echo, and fragmentation, now locks into coherence. The observer and the observed unify. That is the real quantum shift. Let's anchor this with a few final tools. Statement of completion. Write or speak a phrase like, I am no longer negotiating with who I used to be. This is my operating frequency now. Say it with finality. Daily calibration ritual. Begin each day with 3 minutes of presence in your new identity. No effort, just presence. Let it saturate your nervous system. Identity-based decision filter. Every choice, big or small, passes through one question: what would my current self choose? If the answer differs from your impulse, adjust. No reversal policy. If you catch yourself reverting, in speech, thought, or posture, pause, realign. Don't punish. Just re-enter the correct field. Reintegration isn't an ending. It's a stabilization, a merger between awareness and embodiment. The observer that sticks isn't the loudest. It's the most consistent. Once that consistency anchors, the field reflects, not as a gesture of reward, but as a simple mechanical mirror of your vibrational clarity. You are now the cause. Reality becomes the inevitable effect. That completes the series. Let me know if you'd like a compiled version or supporting assets like title suggestions, summaries, or companion pieces.